Welcome to the special council meeting. If you'll take your seats, the meeting is now called to order. This meeting today has a single item, the potential Bartlett Dam participation, and I'd like to recognize our representative, Culloden, in the audience today. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, I wonder if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It looks like we have a lively audience tonight. We have some special guests, and the agenda item is a council discussion of the proposed expansion of Bartlett Lake and possible direction to staff regarding possibility of Cave Creek joining the consortium of other municipalities and water providers for this infrastructure project. And we have Salt River staff here today and our own utility director, who I'll turn the meeting over to at this time.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, we're excited to be able to have this presentation by SRP staff of this project. The project actually started a few years ago, but the town's looking to see if we can evaluate whether or not we want to join on to the group that's already been moving forward. It still has a few more years through to get through the design phase and environmental assessment phase. So it's not into construction yet, but it's in the formation phase of that project. So the town does have a small window to get in on this project. And for everybody, it's an expansion of the Bartlett Dam on Salt River Projects lands, which are actually on the Verde River, which will increase capacity, and it's the additional capacity that's being distributed. So that it's something that won't allow us to get new water for new development, but it actually helps shore up the town's water supplies. And it's almost a year ago today that we actually spoke to the town last about our master plan and all the exercises that we're going through, and then potential hardships the town will have with things like the reallocation of the Colorado River water. And in a few weeks, we'll be bringing back the completed master plan. But tonight, we had this special meeting to have SRP present to council, and then staff will follow that up with a recommendation from council of what we think is the best solution for the town to move forward with. So at the table tonight, we have Olivia Galvin and Kyle Tigman. Jacob Rodriguez will be coming up, and they'll be talking about the facility itself, what's going on. And Anthony Beckham will actually follow up after a 10-minute video that we actually have that will explain. It's called the SCIF. It's the Salt River Cap Interchange Facility. And there's also a KIF, isn't there? There's another one. What's the other one? CFIFs. But I think the video will actually help explain it. And actually, when I saw it, it really pulled it all together. So with that, and we also have Patricia DeRosa as the the SRP Intergovernmental Affairs person in the room. And we also have some people we have Michelle Van Kwathen and Brandy. I keep emailing on Brandy every day here. It's Brandy Thigpen from Black and Veatch here representing the town, both our town legal water attorney and the master plan staff. So with that, I'll turn it over to SRP staff to present.
Yeah, good afternoon. I guess good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having SRP out for this special council meeting. Do I control this from here, Sean? Okay, by introductions, my name is Kyle Tillman. I'm the Director of Water Strategy at Salt River Project, of which this project or this study falls under my organization. I'm going to do just a quick highlight of the system, the river system itself, our facilities, and kind of turn this over to Olivia and Jacob to get into the nuts and bolts of the study that we're doing with the Bureau of Reclamation as far as the Verde system and the sediment that's occurring on the Verde system. So with this, a quick highlight of the SRP watershed is a 13,000 square mile watershed in northern Arizona, as indicated on this map. We do have 6 dams currently that are owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. 2 of those dams are on the Verde River. That would be Horseshoe and Bartlett. There's 4 dams on the Salt River system. So it'd be Roosevelt. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be tested here. So that's Apache Lake, Mormon Flat, and then Stewart Mountain. So those are the 4 dams on the Salt River system. We do have a seventh dam, which is on the Clear Creek system, which is CC Cragen up in the northern part of our watershed. All those dams with the associated rivers and streams comprise of our watershed, to which we make deliveries here to the valley in a 244 square mile service territory. So this is going to be a little confusing, but I'll try to walk through it very slowly here. So kind of to your left, you'll see CC Cragen at the top middle. That's a standalone dam on the Clear Creek system. You'll see that capacity there. If you work your way down and to the left, you have Horseshoe Dam and then Bartlett Dam. Those two, as I mentioned, are the two dams on the Verde River. They total storage capacity-wise of 276,000 acre feet. Item to note, which is why we're pursuing the study with the Bureau of Reclamation, we are seeing significant sediment accruing over time behind Horseshoe. Therein lies some lost storage capacity that we're not able to regain unless we go through this study effort with the Bureau of Reclamation on trying to recapture that lost storage behind Horseshoe. On the right side of the screen, you'll see those 4 dams on the Salt River system, which total about 2 million acre feet of storage. I want to point out comparatively, the Verde system is 12% of SRP's total storage capacity. So when we start looking at lost capacity on the Verde system due to sediment, it adds up pretty quickly of how much we are not able to store because of the small nature of the Verde system itself. The salt system is the backbone of our system, but there's opportunities through this study to see how we can regain that capacity on the Verde to restore our rights to our shareholders. This chart does a couple of things for us as we talk about how SRP operates our system here in the valley with the reservoir system. The shaded blue area represents from 1980 to 2023, the deliveries that we make each year to our customers here in the valley. So in the 1980, almost 1.5 million acre feet to about today, which is just shy of 800,000 acre feet. The green bars represent the total inflow that occurs into our reservoir system from the water that falls on the watershed, both on the Verde and the salt. So you can see the variability that occurs during high inflows during the winter season. We have more than enough that enters our reservoir system to make deliveries to our customers. Then we have periods of dry winter seasons where we don't have enough inflows coming into the reservoirs to make deliveries to our customers. But on the whole, with our proper management of our reservoir system in those high inflows, we try to capture as much as we can and store those behind the reservoirs to be able to prepare ourselves for those dry years that we can still make deliveries with surface water. Now, in those years where we have consecutive years of dry years, dry runoff, and we're not able to fill our reservoirs, we do have an active groundwater management plan here in the valley with our wells that we supplement water to our customers in the event we don't have enough surface water to make our deliveries. So therein lies just the proactive management of not completely draining the reservoirs, but using another source of water to make deliveries. But this also highlights with the climate change that's occurring, we are expected to be drier and hotter summers, but also colder and wetter winters with climate change. So we don't know how Mother Nature is going to react every year on the watershed. So it's our diligence to store everything we can behind our reservoirs and be able to make those deliveries with surface water. But if we had to, we have our groundwater fields to supplement our deliveries. So this all kind of leads into the nature of the study, kind of the things we're going to address with the study with the Bureau of Reclamation, all in an effort, 1, to recapture lost storage due to sediment, and 2, to maintain our deliveries to our shareholders here in the valley. So with that, I'll get into the details, or Olivia will, on the study with the Bureau of Reclamation and where we're going from there.
All right, so Olivia Galvan, I'm the project manager for the feasibility study. So I do want to give a little bit of background on what a feasibility study is, because this is a very unique process. So we are in this partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation. And so that first started with an appraisal study where you, at multiple steps throughout this process, have to show that there is a problem at hand with potential solutions. So the first step of that was the appraisal study that identified the problem, need, and opportunity. You look at existing data, develop alternatives, and have stakeholder engagement. From there, we did determine that this is a problem that needs to be addressed with viable solutions. And during that, the main problem that we found, as Kyle mentioned, is the sedimentation on the Verde River. So our Verde watershed is flashy. We get extreme inflow, extreme flash flood events, and that brings sediment into the reservoir. Horseshoe is the first reservoir that it sees, and so that's why all of that sediment is primarily in Horseshoe, and that takes place of where water can be stored. As Kyle mentioned, the Verde system is 12% of our total storage, but the Verde watershed gets 40% of our inflow. So you can imagine how that disparity just compounds this problem that already exists from an underbalanced system that is experiencing more sedimentation due to the topography of the Verde watershed. So we've lost about 40% of our original storage capacity since construction, and that reduces our available storage for our SRP water shareholders. And then there's something called City of Phoenix Gate water that also exists in Horseshoe, which is the off-project water for City of Phoenix. So during the appraisal study, they did identify that a viable solution is the proposed Bartlett Dam modification that would be raised in order to address this loss of storage capacity that has occurred. So our alternatives that we analyzed in the appraisal study, so you always have to have it without action. So you'll see that through the feasibility study as well as a dredging option. Many people, when they hear about this project and hear about the problem being sediment in the reservoir, the first thing they say is, well, just go dredge out that sediment, go dig it up. Horseshoe is in a very remote spot where, again, it would be very difficult to access in addition to extreme environmental and cultural considerations that exist. So still an alternative, but the two primary alternatives are the Bartlett modifications, where it would be a raise of 97 feet or 62 feet, and that was identified in the appraisal study. And so that went through the whole federal process where they looked at those two dam options. So that's how that reservoir would be expanded. So Bartlett would be expanded and back up to Horseshoe. So you can kind of see that inundation area of what that 62-foot raise would look like versus that 97-foot raise based off of those two dam heights. And I'll go through more details on the feasibility study. So basically they did identify in the appraisal study that this should move forward to feasibility, which is where we are now. So the feasibility study was authorized by Title IX of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So that gave us the funding to partner with Reclamation to start this feasibility study. So we're still in the, formulating, evaluating, and comparing alternative plans phase. So number 4 is kind of where we're at currently. And so we are hoping to go through the environmental process pretty shortly. But there are many, many steps to a feasibility study. It's not just an engineering analysis of how do you do a 30% design for a dam, or how do you do a 30% design for dredging material out of a reservoir. It's the engineering technical analysis, the hydrological technical analysis, and economical analysis, a financial analysis. There are many, many, many steps along the way, because ultimately this will go to Congress for approval. And in order to meet the requirements of a feasibility study, you have to check all of these boxes. And so that's the process we are going through right now in partnership with Reclamation. And part of that partnership is a cost share. So it requires a 50% non-federal cost share. So that encompasses SRP and our non-federal partners. So that's currently 23 non-federal partners, which we call the steering committee, which Jacob will talk about in a little bit. And that is a requirement. It has to be 50%. Reclamation cannot contribute more than 50%. So we do have the same problems in the feasibility study that we had in the appraisal study of the lost capacity due to sedimentation, as well as the future sediment accumulations along the reservoir. And to Kyle's point earlier, this decreases our resiliency and our ability to store water that then needs to be delivered during drought times. So the needs of this project is to restore lost capacity, manage future sediment loadings, and increase renewable water supplies, where two of the options are the modified Bartlett Dam proposal. So this is kind of a graphic of what it would look like. So the existing dam that we have out there is a multiple arch buttress dam completed in 1939. The new dam, because of the dam height and the dam foundation, you can't just build on top of a dam. There has to be a new dam in front of the old dam. So that kind of looks like, oh, I'll show it on the next screen of what that will look like. But the partners that we have for the feasibility study, so this partnership, the non-federal 50% that I mentioned, a lot of those cities are shown on this screen, not all of them. The shaded area is SRP's on Project Water. So many people on this screen are part of this partnership that we have, where we are talking about what's called the new Verde space capacity. So SRP has existing water in Bartlett, as well as the Horseshoe water, which will move over to Bartlett. I mentioned the Phoenix Gate water capacity that has existed since the 1940s. That will also be moving to Bartlett. So the new Verde space is what we are talking about today, about what can be allocated and what is available for partners that are interested in obtaining additional water. So how are we going to use a modified Bartlett Dam to pass sediment, right? So the sediment accumulations will continue throughout the Verde system throughout time. Horseshoe will fill up with sediment over time as more sediment comes in, and that sediment will ultimately make its way into Bartlett. And one thing that we've learned throughout this process as we do the hydrological, that's what I'm trying to say, technical analysis of this study is that the wet years are going to get wet and the dry years are going to be more dry. And what that means for sediment passage is that those inflows coming in have so much sediment, but they have so much force behind them that can then be routed through the reservoir system. So that would use existing Horseshoe to pass that sediment flood coming in. And then as that water is moving through Bartlett, better engineering on the dam to promote sediment passage without wasting water. So we would be looking at these, what we call those Verde spill, those green bars that we see here, as really the best opportunities to move sediment throughout the system and continue moving it so that we have a solution in the future so that this doesn't happen again. Oh, I lost my dam picture. Well, the new dam, the new dam would be in front. It's kind of looks like a boomerang. Yeah, so one of the things that we assessed as part of the engineering feasibility is how high can you make that dam? So I had mentioned in the appraisal study, it was that 97-foot raise. What we learned through our engineering analysis, because we are doing a 30% design of this new dam as one of our alternatives, is that it can actually be a little bit higher. The maximum height is actually 101.8, and that's as high as it can be without impacting Horseshoe Dam above, which is an additional water supply. So the appraisal study identified that new Verde space as 305,000 acre feet. We are still going through the feasibility study, so that number is not finalized, but it's around 328,000, 100,000 acre feet. And now I'll turn it over to Jacob.
So that's a good overview of the watershed, SRP's watershed, and the project itself. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about project schedule. I'll show a high-level schedule, where we're at now and where we're moving in the future over the next 3 to 6 months. And then I'll talk about the steering committee. What are the roles and responsibilities of the steering committee? What would be required if the town of Cave Creek decided to join as a participant? And what is the timeline as far as being able to join? We're under kind of a tight timeline right now as we're moving towards the NEPA process, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I'll touch on the allocation. The new Verde space, we call it NVS, is the allocation of water that we are distributing amongst the 22 non-federal partners. There is some interest on the federal side for allocation in the New Verde space. And so those discussions are currently being had as well. So this is a high level overview of the schedule. The upper portion, the yellow portion there is the federal study, where we are in the federal study. The lower portion in blue is the non-federal activities that are currently taking place or that have taken place. The red line there, kind of moving up and down from the top to the bottom of the screen there, is currently where we're at. So as Olivia mentioned, we've completed the appraisal study. We are moving into the feasibility study. We're identifying different alternatives and providing information, background information on each of those alternatives from a technical perspective. Working with the Bureau of Reclamation on those alternatives and putting together what I would say 30% design, pre-feasibility practices right now to move into the actual feasibility study. The goal right now is we're looking to move into the NEPA process in February. So in order to do that, we need to issue the NOI by the end of November, the notice of intent. And so that kind of tells you right now that kind of shows just the tight timeline that we're under. Before we issue the NOI, we do need to understand all the participants and the allocation of the New Verde space. So that's kind of what we would be working towards. The NEPA process and the feasibility study process would wrap up in the 2027 timeframe. And at that point, we would be looking to get congressional authorization. That would probably spill over into 2028, hoping to get a decision in 2028, hoping to get congressional authorization by 2028. Looking at the bottom of the schedule here, those are the non-federal activities. The steering committee developed a criteria for water needs. That was done back in 2022 and 2023. From that, they agreed upon a process in which they would determine capacity allocations in the New Verde space. Not knowing what the federal interest is right now, they did allocate 100% of the New Verde space spread amongst the 22 non-federal partners. It's understood that there will be some federal interest, so we will go back to the table to reassess that and reevaluate that once we know the federal interest. And I've got a slide here in a little bit. I'll expand a little bit more on that. Moving forward into 2025, 26, and 27, in parallel with the NEPA and feasibility process, we would be working to construct a cost share agreement with the non-federal partners for construction. They would be preparing their funding, and operating agreement conversations would start taking place. So the purpose of this steering committee, is really to provide guidance and feedback to the Bureau of Reclamation in the feasibility study process. There's different goals and objectives that need to be met at various milestones throughout the feasibility process. So the steering committee would be providing support for that. The steering committee also oversees and puts together the annual budget. That's voted upon and approved upon by the steering committee. And they provide data and information for any analysis that needs to be done, both in the appraisal and in the feasibility study. And really, overall, just providing communication. Providing communication from the steering committee, some of the decisions that are being made, and then taking it back to their prospective entities. So if the town of Cave Creek did decide to become a member, we would ask for them to identify a representative and an alternative. Representative would need to be at that director level or above. They would be attending the steering committee meetings. They would be an advocate for the project. They would be receiving all the communication in regards to the steering committee. And they would be attending quarterly meetings, and they work collaboratively with the other steering committee members. In order to become a participant, that would have to go to the existing steering committee, and they would have to, it would go to a formal vote, and they would determine whether they would want to accept any new members into the committee. As far as the timeline, again, we're looking to issue the NOI in the November timeframe. So we would be looking, if the town of Cave Creek was interested in joining, we would be asking for a letter of intent that shows that you have approval from the town council and that you have funds to be able to support the project. We would ask for that probably in the September timeframe. That would go to the committee for a vote. If they did vote yes, then we would have a subcommittee that would work with the Cave Creek representative to do a needs assessment and understand the allocation that would be requested for Cave Creek. Again, that would go back to the overall committee, and they would vote on that as well in the November meeting. The November meeting, I think, is middle of November, November 14th, if I remember correctly. So between now and then, we would need to get that letter of intent. We would have to go through a vote, and we would have to do that needs assessment and allocation assessment prior to the meeting in November 14th. So pretty quick, pretty tight timeline, but it can be done. It's just, we would have to work closely with you to kind of get through that quick turnaround and that tight timeline. As far as funding for the steering committee, there's two different levels. There's a voting member and there's a non-voting member. The voting members vote on items like the budget, the annual budget, changes to the budget. They voted on processes such as the needs assessment, the allocation process that they're following. So more process driven, they budget driven, and then also they vote on the membership, new members entering in as participants. This slide here shows the funding differences between a voting member and a non-voting member. The total projected commitments for the voting member is 682,000, and the non-voting member is 205,000. Those are projected commitments because we are currently looking at a change order, which is shown on the last column there, the projected future invoices. And so we're finalizing some of those costs. So there may be slight variations in those projected future invoices. The first invoice, whether you're a voting member or non-voting member, would be 300,000 or 90,000. That would be what the current 22 non-federal partners have been billed over the first 3 years. We would invoice that within 30 days of you becoming a member. And then there would be another invoice in the spring timeframe for the federal fiscal year 2025, the 100,000 or 30,000. The projected future invoices, again, are based on some additional activities that needed to be performed in the feasibility study. And we're working with the Bureau of Reclamation to finalize those. We're working with some of our contractors to finalize costs. So we should have a better understanding of some of those final numbers here within the next month. Again, that would go to a vote in the November meeting with the 22 non-federal partners. But the future invoices would be spread out over two federal fiscal years, over 2026 and 2027. So the initial invoice would be for everything for the first 3 years. There would be a spring invoice for the federal fiscal year 2025, and then subsequent subsequent invoices in 2026 and 2027 for those additional scope increases. So as far as allocation, again, the new Verde space is what we're focused on right now. The 22 non-federal partners have gone through the needs assessment and allocation of the new Verde space, and it's 100% allocated to the 22 non-federal partners. It's understood, work in talking with the Bureau of Reclamation, there will be some federal interest in that new Verde space allocation. We're expected to get we're expected to get a decision on that from them at the beginning of September. At that time, the subcommittee will go back and they will start reassessing their allocation. If the town of Cave Creek did decide to join, at that time, we would also be assessing kind of what that allocation would be for Cave Creek and what the impacts would be to the other 22 non-federal partners. So that's sort of the tight timeline that we're working on, is in that late September, October timeframe, is kind of finalizing those allocations to bring that to the vote in November, at the November 14th meeting. I think that's all I have as far as allocation and the steering committee, but
I'm sure we had some questions.
yeah, yep. So the group can open it up to questions.
Is this a good time for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Will this presentation be available to us?
Yeah, we can provide it.
Yeah, I've got the slides. We'll actually make it available. We got them last night.
I'll just start off with a general question that, being a Phoenix and Arizona native, why are non-SRP customers being allowed to participate at all? I'm thinking, well, you'd probably have enough demand from the existing SRP, the service areas and customers to handle it, and water is going to be short in Arizona.
It's a
So-
similar, council member, Mayor, sorry, were you complete with your question?
Yeah, why are people from outside the SRP service area and outside the sphere of SRP, without connections to SRP at all, even considered for participation?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. It's similar to that Phoenix Gate water that I mentioned at Horseshoe. So at that time in the 1940s, City of Phoenix built the gates on Horseshoe that then allowed that water to be considered off project. And so SRP currently, the way that our water is delivered to our shareholders is based off of the lands that were used against collateral for the federal government to build Roosevelt Dam. So that's what we consider the on-project shareholders. So what we're talking about here is an investment in infrastructure that would classify the water as off-project, similar to what City of Phoenix did in the 1940s at Horseshoe for what we are now calling the Phoenix Gate water credits.
So if I was anywhere else around and I wanted to be on it, would I be a candidate for admission? I mean, I looked at the list, and most of the cities and are in there. I'm just trying to understand. And it follows in the question of the allocations, which is a real key question for me. Is I'm sure you're going to be over allocated. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, but I would think you'd be over allocated. So but why wouldn't the existing members and SRP just keep this all for themselves?
Well, Mayor Morris, we do have communities that we want to support, and we have the electrical infrastructure as well. So in order to expand our electrical systems to support some of those communities, it's going to require water as well. And so it would be more of a benefit to us to be able to provide water to those customers that are also power users as well, to be able to support growth in those communities.
We don't get power from you.
Yeah. And Mayor Morris, we are able to meet the needs of our shareholders throughout the next 100 years. So looking at that hydrology, that triangle graph I had with the blue, yellow, green figure. So we are still able to meet our needs for water. If you remember Kyle's picture, we've pretty much had the same demand in SRP, and we don't anticipate that changing, especially as more and more ag converts to municipal. So we have this consistent demand where it's an interesting perspective that we're in, right? Because SRP, you know, we could have taken it, but we don't need to. So it's better to offer to the community that we live in for potential other water cuts as well as groundwater use. We see those two very large needs with the non-federal partners that are interested in this water. So we are confident that we are able to meet our SRP shareholders as well as provide this as a resource.
So will the new customers have the same priority standing as the older customers, or is there a difference in priority?
Great question, Mayor Morris. Arizona water law is a first in time, first in right state. So the priority system is based off of the first priority. So the SRP is the oldest priority on the Verde watershed. The new Verde space would be junior priority, and that's why it's shown at the top of the dam in all the pictures. So it's a similar stepped up allocation where the dam accrues along the side.
So if there's a shortage, each of the 22 people, new partners would each have their allocation or some kind of, they'd be equal in priority as far as getting a piece of whatever was available?
There is a lot of complexity to how the water was allocated. It's primarily based off of need. So, you know, all of the cities and other entities submitted their requests for water. The need is greater than the water available. So the criteria that was established by the steering committee and was voted on looked at, you know, what is basically the fairest way to do this. So SRP did not, you know, give these guidelines. These were decided upon the steering committee. This was the thing that was primarily voted on, was how do you have so many different entities with so many different interests, so many different sizes that all have this interest in this water. What does this process look like? And it is a lengthy document of how this
Is that
allocation
public
was.
that we can get a copy of that?
If you are interested in joining, it would be something that you would have to see in order to see, you know,
Yeah.
what allocation you're interested in.
And Mayor Morris, that's the process. Once this goes to a vote and Cave Creek is voted in, then we would go through the needs assessment and the allocation process. And so we would be able to provide you those documents. We will be able to walk you through that process. But it requires the town of Cave Creek being voted in as a member. Then that kind of kicks off that process that we would
But
go
we'd have to
through.
have some kind of idea how much water was available. Wouldn't we?
So-
I mean, to make a decision, a financial decision, you usually have some kind of idea what the reward is.
Which would be part of the whole process. So that, to Jacob's point, there would be a voting in based off of the other steering committee members. And yeah, there's a lot of interest in the water, but there is still a process at play here, and there is still the ability to be a part of this
So
process.
you wouldn't cash the check until we saw the numbers, I guess.
So I guess as far as funding, if you become a steering committee, if you become a participant, we would go through the process of putting it to a vote to the steering committee. Then we would go through the needs assessment. We would go through the allocation assessment. Then it would go to another vote to finalize the allocation for the new Verde space. At that time, you know, once all parties are happy or are in agreement, then that's when the billing and
Okay.
invoicing would start. So it doesn't start at those initial stages. It's once
So
you
you're
get-
not going to take a check home tonight, I guess? I'm going to open this up to the council.
Yeah,
Council
I've
has
got
some-
I've got a couple questions. So we're not in the Verde River system. How would we get the water out of the Bartlett Lake Dam improvement?
So, yeah, that's a good question, Councilmember Rhodes. It would, so we don't supply water to the different cities. The city would be responsible for acquiring the water and getting it up to your infrastructure into Cave Creek. The next presentation that Anthony is going to give is going to talk about a facility that we're looking at constructing that may help and may assist in that process.
Are you tied into the to the Central Arizona project? Because they already have a distribution system. I mean, that would seem to be like a no-brainer to me.
So currently, we're not. Currently, we can accept water from CAP, but we can't exchange water in the other direction. But the project that Anthony is going to talk about here in a little bit is an interconnection project between SRP and CAP, where we would be able to deliver water into their system. And
Okay,
so
that answered my question. As
Okay.
long as you can deliver it into the system and we can do the water offsets, I mean, that's normal way of doing business in Arizona.
Councilmember Elkema is on the line there. Paul, if you have any questions, jump in, maybe give you an opportunity now since you're remote.
Well, thanks. And the question that I have is, and this is on the allocation, there are 22 people or 22 groups looking at a fixed amount of water. And so if they, I guess, by a vote, invite another organization in, they're gonna put their current allocation at risk for reduction to account for a new member in the group? I mean, help me understand I guess, the politics of this.
Mayor, Council, you are correct. And we have brought in, I would like to point out, we did bring in a late member as well, Carefree. They did join last year. So we have been through this process already where a lot of these questions came up from the other non-federal partners. We are about to go through another reallocation if there's a federal water interest as well. So the entire time that we've been throughout this process, we do message every time that this is being 100% allocated without the environmental process starting off, which means one, there is the opportunity for new members to come in, and two, the federal water interest can also come in. So these are points that we have made every time. And we did see the same questions and same discussions when Carefree joined, and they were able to join. So I can't say with certainty it's a yes or no, but we have been through this process before. And we would hope that they would allow another member.
Can you give me a wild approximation of the amount of water we're talking about per allocation?
Great question, Mayor, Council. So that would be part of the need assessment that Cave Creek would have to go through. So what all the cities did is they, basically looked at their Colorado supplies, they looked at their groundwater supplies, and there's different criteria based off of, different, say, cuts to the Colorado system, different, needs for groundwater. So it's hard to sum up in a sentence, but that is part of the process, right? So you could go in with a number in mind, or you could go through the needs process to figure out where you fit in. Either option is available.
Could you
Thanks.
clarify who the federal interests are?
We do not know at this time.
So somebody's just saying that there's federal interest, but you don't know who that is.
So the partnership with Reclamation. So this is a feasibility study with the Bureau of Reclamation. So part of their process is looking at if there's any federal water needs that would need to be met as part of this project. So we do not have any clarity at this time because they are hoping to get it to us in early September.
Oh, they're going to get a share,
If they would like to. This is
which brings up the lawsuit that we've heard about. Are you a lawyer too?
Mayor, Council, at this time, I cannot say what their interest is. We feel like there's likely an interest, just because, it's not very common that new projects come along with a new water source such as a dam. If that is the option that is chosen as part of the feasibility study. But at this time, we are speculating as well.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor Morris, I just want to add, we are working with Reclamation. We have been asking kind of for a timeline as to when we would know that federal interest. They're targeting September 1st. We don't really have an indication how much they're going to be asking for or how much they're going to be requesting. So we are kind of working with them as far as the timing, but as far as some of the information, background information, we won't know that for probably a couple weeks still.
Okay, I have another process question. On your fact sheet that we have before us, has SRP done something like this before? Yes, in the 1990s, you modified Roosevelt Dam along the Salt River for $430 million. This current process involves stakeholders. Did that one?
Audience?
Kyle?
So Mayor and Council, so the 1995 modification of Roosevelt Dam was indeed funded through partnerships through some non-federal entities along with the Bureau of Reclamation. So through that process, additional storage was created, much like this study we're going through on Bartlett Dam, where in turn the partners received percentage allocation of that new space that was created based on their funding mechanism.
So the funding for this current project, what is it being used for right now?
So good question, Mayor and Council. So currently, we have a feasibility study authorized by Congress, which is, as Olivia mentioned, it's a $28 million study. Half of it's funded by the Bureau of Reclamation. The other half is through the non-federal partners as required by the federal government. Strictly, it's getting a study created to present alternatives for Congress to consider which is the best means to address the sediment mitigation efforts on the Verde system. So I will say Congress eventually has the official approval of what alternative to go with. So is there some risk of spending money on a study and the result comes back from Congress to the Bureau of Reclamation that they only approve dredging of Horseshoe Dam? That's a possibility. But that's why you go through a study, the whole NEPA process to vet out all those items and issues and present that entire paperwork through the Bureau to Congress for their consideration. So we can't stand here today and say we're going to do X, Y, or Z specifically, because that will eventually be up to Congress.
So $28 million is all to do research.
To do a study and prepare it and do environmental studies and reports and do public awareness and seek public comment, all for that effort to go to Congress, correct?
Okay. It has nothing to do with one drop of water.
It is to, on paper, allocate, but that risk is it may not happen.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So assuming Congress, probably a 99% that they will, what's the timeline after that? How long is it going to take to build the dam? How long is it going to take to fill the reservoir, and when would that water begin to be available?
Mayor, Council, so we are hoping to get the feasibility study to Congress by the end of 2027. We would hope that they would approve quickly, but we have no certainty on how long it takes them to appropriate and authorize a project based on what is going on in Congress at that time. Again, we would hope it would go quickly. From there, it would have to go to further design level. So it's currently at a 30% engineering design of the two dam alternatives. That's part of the feasibility study. So it would have to go through final design and then construction. Construction is anticipated about 5 years in duration for the largest dam. It would be slightly less for the smaller dam raise. So we would anticipate, if we were able to do some type of, lumped construction engineering contract where we could move some of these processes a little further, probably 6 to 7 years after Congress approves to get that engineering design as well as construction complete.
And then how long to fill the reservoir? Just a guess on average.
That is very dependent on the hydrology.
Understand, I mean, given there are some historical records here, and there's an average, I'm sure, that comes in.
Yeah, great question. I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom?
Have you looked at the idea that what is lost from the Verde system by overflow is then going into your aquifer and then becomes available to you as groundwater?
Great question, Mayor Council. We are looking at that as part of the impact of the feasibility study. So what you're referring to is the spill events that happen on the Verde system. To our point, it's 12% of our storage, but 40% of the inflow. So that does happen. So we will be studying those impacts through NEPA, but do not have that answer at this time.
Does staff have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, did you? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Tom.
Just out of curiosity, does SRP favor one height over the other, or are you neutral on that? I just was curious if you had a professional preference.
Great question. The engineering supports either one. So, from a risk to the current dam or the dam upstream, that was our interest so I'd mentioned how 101.8 is the absolute tallest it can be without impacting the dam above. We're obviously very interested in that dam above not being impacted. So either one supports. It's good rock quality on site to support a dam foundation.
Mayor, Council, I guess to add to that, that's all part of the feasibility study as well. We're going to go through each alternative, and from an engineering design standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of factors involved. And so going through that complete analysis will help us determine what is the best alternative. So it's kind of hard to answer that question today until we get through all of the feasibility study. We may have a preference today, but as we go through the feasibility study, we may encounter cultural, environmental concerns that you kind of steer us away from that alternative. So I guess to answer that, it would be hard to answer today, but that's part of the feasibility process.
Another question for you. Everyone's familiar with the concept of, pay to play. To me, what's more fascinating than how much water the town could eventually, or the region up here could eventually get from this type of inclusion is really more of the status of the town's relationship with SRP, and especially in the future. I think future policy on water in the state will be largely led by SRP, just as electric generation is led by APS and its relationship with the regional producers and so forth. And it would be a shame to miss this opportunity and end up like Rio Verde, who had to have water cobbled together at the legislature and beyond to serve the people in that region. It seems to me the opportunity for inclusion in this confederation is priceless beyond the water, because it gives us infrastructure access that we would never be able to even closely, and especially down the road when membership will not be open. This boat is the whistle has blown and the gangplank is one left on the harbor. It just seems like the timing could not be more fortunate. But even more important for me, at least, than the water that would be delivered would be the protection of the organization, and especially SRP in particular, in the years ahead. So I think there's a water benefit. I think there's a policy benefit in the near term, but I think there's predictive protection for this part of Maricopa County and in this incorporated area in particular. And for our Twin City Carefree to be ahead of us on that, I think we ought to hasten to try to catch up. That's just my personal.
Any other staff? Ernie?
Yeah, of the 22 partners you have here, how many are voting?
Great question. We'll have to get back to you on that. I will say most are voting. We've got a handful of non-voting. So most are voting, but it would not be uncharacteristic to be a non-voting member.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, if you don't mind, it's 13 or 14 voting members, so we can get you the exact number, but.
Next question. I've heard something about you running into a problem with birds or something in the dam location and having to think about a different spot. Is that?
That's my problem. Great
ahead,
question, Mayor Council. So we'd alluded to part of the feasibility study potentially needing more funding. That is for something called a trial quarry, where we are going to test the rock that exists at the reservoir that would then be used to build the dam potentially. So we are studying the feasibility of that process. So there were some environmental restrictions that we did have to accommodate at this time. So that would not impact the feasibility of the dam, but does impact our ability to get out there and get some rocks. But we did find a solution and we have moved forward, and that work will take place this fall.
Okay, so I'm going to tell, I don't know that I see enough gray hair up there for this question.
I don't have hair to begin with. so-
Well, yeah, I'm working. I think we got the same barber. Way back, I mean, Salt River Project has a rather contentious relationship with two organizations, one of which is the Audubon Society, and the other is the Sierra Club. Going back in the recesses of my mind, were you under a federal order at one time, Horseshoe, to have a maximum pool that you could maintain because some silly bird nested in the dead trees?
So Mayor and Council, we do have what we call a habitat conservation plan at Horseshoe to account for some biological critters to maintain a habitat at Horseshoe. So through an environmental process that came out that we need to modify how the Horseshoe is operated and make sure we have a certain levels there to provide a habitat for them.
Okay, so your numbers for total storage, I would assume that the floodplain that backed up behind the dam, your area that you're talking about maintaining for habitat.
Yeah, Mayor and Council.
That's why you dump water out of Horseshoe so fast whenever it comes in, because you have to do that, maintain that environmental plan. So
that, in addition to the sediment not being
Yeah.
able to store. So correct.
yeah, you can't launch a boat up there. It's way too muddy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with this study, I will add that we recognize, and we've already engaged in conversations with those environmental entities. There is going to be land that's going to be inundated if Congress passes one of these dam alternatives. So we are already having conversations about what that looks like. But that official process will happen when we do the kickoff in November with a notice of intent to start the 2+ year NEPA process as required for any federal project.
Yeah, so I guess the reason I'm asking those questions, it appears to me there's an awful lot of unknowns at this point in time that are pretty scary. First of all, depending on water, the watershed actually delivering the water, and you've got a tremendous Verde watershed is pretty darn big, and you're missing some other tributaries, but I don't want to talk about them. All right, thank you. I guess that's the end of my questions.
Mayor and Council, just to add, again, going back to the feasibility study, that's the purpose of the feasibility study. We are going to look at some of those environmental concerns. We are going to look at some of those cultural concerns, what the impacts will be. So we may not have the answers today, but that's part of the process. That's part of going through the NEPA process. That's part of going through the feasibility study. That's a 2-year process. So it's going to develop over time before we have some of those answers.
Yeah, historical perception would for me would be that you're going to get to deal with those two entities again, because they're always negative on
Completely agree, Mayor and Council, and we're open and welcome to that. Again, Bureau of Reclamation will be joining us in those conversations and those public outreaches and answering those questions and going through what mitigations have to take place if this project is approved to accommodate certain archaeological, cultural habitat sites. So yes.
Yeah, y'all did a great job on Roosevelt. There's a lot more places to bass fish now.
I have a
I have
question.
I have a question about Roosevelt, if I may. It sounds like this project sort of is the same process in terms of putting a dam together. And I know nothing about dams, but I do know that it's a big system, and I'm wondering what does it cost to run that thing? And is that something we should be looking at in terms of future liability? We're a town that operates on sales tax, and I don't know. What does it cost to run Roosevelt? Is that a money-making proposition?
So Mayor and Council, the federal government owns the assets. By contract with the federal government, we operate, maintain, and care those systems for them on our behalf. So if talking about costs to operate and maintain a system, that's all on SRP to do because of our contract with the Bureau of Reclamation.
So to be part of the water fee, X many dollars per acre foot, right? That's what we would get charged to pass through.
I believe when we go through the cost allocation or the cost share agreement with all the partners, I don't know if, that's a good question. I don't know if maintenance is part of that analysis or not, if it's just pure construction of the dam.
I'm sure though, that if you're gonna pump water into the system, we're gonna have to pay for the water. Part of paying for the water is maintaining the resource. So it'll be built into the cost, I'm pretty sure.
We'll take a look at that. The federal government has guidelines of what goes into those cost share agreements, but we'll get back to you on that.
Along those same lines, do you have any idea what the cost per acre foot might be for any additional water supplies?
Great question. At this time, we are waiting for the updated cost estimate. So as I mentioned, we are in 30% design as part of the feasibility study. So we have the number from the appraisal study, which was 1.2 billion. That was a class 5 estimate. So that's a very high level, not a lot of information. We are anticipating our class 3 estimate based off the 30% design in mid-September. So that's when we would have that cost of what it will be for the feasibility study of what is assumed to be the full dam construction, and that will be conveyed to all of the non-federal partners for that answer of what is that cost per acre foot.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Questions from me, Mark?
Kyle, Jacob, I'm not sure. It came up during our discussion a couple weeks ago, but I think it's important for the council to hear. So process-wise, if we were to join the consortium or the be one of the non-governmental, non-federal partners, I think what I heard was as part of the feasibility study, it comes back and you're at a point where you've gone and, you know, you're about to go out to do an RFP for the construction of this. There's an opportunity for an out, one last opportunity for us to get out. And I think that's important in this process because, you know, these could be very scary numbers. We're only a community of about 5,000 people. We have a very small water system. So I think we've heard a lot about risks today and there's a lot of unknowns. But I would say, and I would tell you, I think that's one of the best takeaways here is that if we were to do the front end, which could be very costly for this potential investment, there is a potential for us to get out if we decided after seeing some scary costs that it wasn't like something we wanted to pursue. So I just wanted to verify, is that
Yes,
still
absolutely correct. Mayor and council, we are only committed with the federal government to do this study. There will be a completely new separate cost share agreement to finish design and construction after Congress approves the alternative that they want us to pursue. At that time, partners would need to consider if they're in based on the alternative approved by Congress and the costs associated with that alternative to continue on at the allocation that was approved by Congress or not. So beyond the study, there's an opportunity to not continue past that point.
Once Congress approves, would the Bureau still contribute 50%?
So the Bureau of Reclamation, because they're the lead agency on this, they must design and construct it. They must own the contract to design and construct the facility because it's their asset. So that we as SRP, acting on behalf of the non-federal partners, will enter into a new cost share agreement with them once Congress approves it. Then we will know how the cost share agreement will work between the non-federal partners. So we don't know at this point in time.
But they will have some ownership. The Bureau.
Absolutely, correct. Yes.
They have to, otherwise Congress can't give them any
Correct.
funding or can't provide any funding.
I see our water attorney would like to ask a question. Michelle?
had two questions based on what I heard before that I thought everybody might want to hear. I'll ask both questions and then you guys can answer. The first question is to ask whether any projections of probability of availability have been made based on dammed water. For instance, the Plan 6 capacity at Roosevelt isn't available every year because there's not enough water in the system to satisfy all the demands that have priority. And so I think it's important to understand if there was an allocation of water, how often do we think it might be available? That's the first question. The second question, I'm really not sure the answer. Sean may know, but we have heard that you may need to also buy into the SCIF in order to transport water from one system to another. I know that this town would have to have a partner that we'd have to develop to actually get the water because we don't have a physical way to get it. But is there a requirement to also get into the SCIF process?
So I'll take the first question if you want to take the second. Okay. So the first question was about, how do you know that if you build a dam that you have the water available, and can you show that you have the water available? So that is part of the climate change and hydrology technical analysis as part of the feasibility study. Is we are looking at how climate change is going to impact the hydrology in the future, and what does that mean for accruals on a dam? So what we're talking about is that new Verde space, and that again, that triangle graph. I wish I could pull it back up. The Verde system is very volatile. So we have those years of drought, but we have those years of extreme inflow. So the dam would allow you to capture those years of extreme runoff. And we do see accruals happening throughout, but it is a balance of the wet and dry. That new Verde space is about a 3.5 to 1 capacity to yield ratio. So many people that are interested in a specific amount of water, if you only wanted 500 acre feet, if that's all you bought, it could not be guaranteed at 500 acre feet per year because of the hydrology and that balance of the wet and dry. So what many partners are doing is 3.5 times whatever they're interested in to make sure that water is available based off of the average annual yield. So this dam is appropriately sized for the hydrology. It is a good balance of the wet and dry. But building a bigger dam at this point would not give more water, but the hydrology does support the dam that we do have.
I'll take the second question, Jacob. So no, being a partner to this project does not automatically need you to be a partner to the SCIF project. We have way less partners on the SCIF project than we do with this feasibility study. Therein is an opportunity to council members comment before. SRP could help facilitate discussions. If you're a member of the Bartlett project only, we could help facilitate discussions on water exchanges with other entities, that you can exchange your allocation of water with someone else, whether we use our infrastructure or not, and help arrange where water could get into, let's say, the CAP canal upstream of you, or what have you. And we're happy to facilitate those discussions like we do today with many of our SRP customers and non-SRP customers. So the answer is no, you don't have to be a partner to both.
Just to add to that, we actually do have a quick presentation about the SCIF project, and there's actually a video that helps explain those water exchanges. So for the town's benefit, if we move forward with the Bartlett Dam discussion and agree to move forward with that project, it may make sense for us to actually join the SCIF project to allow us that flexibility of the water exchanges on the cap water. And the graphics actually explain that very well. So we'll let that run a minute. I did have a couple of questions just to confirm. The action for our council tonight is we have a short fuse if we want to move ahead with this. Just want to make sure I've got the numbers right. Is it $205,000 total in, or is it the projected future invoices for the change order will be on top of that? So we're talking a $290,000 commitment?
Yes, so Mayor and Council. So Sean, yes. So if you like to be interested in being a non-voting member, the total commitment that we would ask out of Cave Creek is $205,000. So that would include the 4 years of $30,000 each, plus the change order amount roughly in the amount of $85,000, which equates to the 205.
Okay, thank you.
And again, the last change order amounts could be paid over the 2 fiscal years in 26 and 27 if need be. So
And
that
then
would be the total.
And then future construction costs, there's too many variables at this point, something similar to when the Central Arizona project was constructed, that was funded by federal dollars, and then the capital costs are being repaid by the users as it goes forward. Is there any hope of mechanism like that? Or for a small agency like us, will there be a fairly hefty bill to be paid up front for the project, or you guys, that's all unknown at this point?
So Mayor and Council, I don't want to call you Sean.
Yeah.
So, okay, I don't know if I can pronounce your last name. So.
It takes a while.
Okay, so that is the beauty of the cost share agreement. When we get to that point, I mean, there is probably a draft template the federal government would like us to use between SRP and them.
Okay.
And how it works with the non-federal partners. We could probably write in any terms and conditions that talk about payment plans and of that nature, much like we did with this feasibility study and how we did 4 years of a financial commitment.
That's nice, because again, hearing a $1.2 million cost estimate with a level 5, it just scares me a little bit. For a small agency, it's hard for small. So that's something, if the town elects to move forward with this, and town staff will provide a recommendation, is, that it's $205,000 commitment right now for the next 3 years to get us a seat at the table is something that, so that actually is more palatable, I think. So we'll provide staff recommendation. And then the future, we have to figure this out. As we presented to council before, our water future is very uncertain right now. And as we've mentioned last year, when we presented the draft master plan, and then we'll present in a couple of weeks, the final master plan, the town is in a situation with the shortages and the reallocation of the Colorado River of having to find new water resources. Knowing that this is best case scenario, 2032 to 2035 timeframe, that does put us in a situation we got to fill in that gap still, but it might be a solution for us. But there's a lot of unknowns too, and there's a lot of cost. But nothing with water is going to be cheap, so it's something that we have to look forward to.
Okay, are we ready to move to the next presentation about the skiff? Is that, do we have another one coming?
Yeah. I would recommend, do you want to do the
Yes,
video
something more.
first?
Can I ask one?
Sure.
more?
Yeah, I think the video helps explain big picture, and then we'll have a quick couple of slides after that.
We have one more
I
question.
got one more question for you. Looking through your documentation, I don't see any mention of hydroelectric, so that's not part of the project. Is that?
Sorry, I didn't.
Oh,
your-
sorry,
the question.
hydroelectric. I thought you heard I heard 5-year electric. Sorry, Mayor Council. So there is a small microturbine currently on the dam that provides site power that will continue throughout the project. But basically a feasibility study is so complex for the alternatives that we have that it was decided to put hydroelectric provisions for the future if desired. But in order to move this process through Congress and through feasibility study, there are no lines out there currently. So you would have to go through all of the siting studies as well. So it's better to have provisions now to allow for it in the future is what
So
we
you're
decided.
Planning ahead, so at a later date, SRP could actually put the turbines in and generate. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. As you can tell, we're all highly interested, engaged.
Yeah. So the next, the video is about 10 minutes in length, and then there's a couple of slides to follow up that the project manager can help explain the SCIF project a little bit more. And then I think at that, we can have more council discussion and then open it up to the public questions.
Arizona's water history is distinguished by the impact of strategic water infrastructure. The key to unlocking the full potential of that infrastructure is the interconnection between existing facilities. Maximizing the use of existing facilities affords the greatest return on investment while providing the greatest water resource benefit for SRP shareholders and regional partners. One example is the interconnection between the Salt River Project and the Central Arizona Project water systems. Delivering a combined 2.3 million acre-feet per year to over 5 million Arizonans, SRP and CAP manage the water resources that support Central Arizona's economy. The CAP water system begins with intake pumps at Lake Havasu that divert Colorado River water into the CAP canal. With a capacity of 3,300 cubic feet per second, the CAP canal transports about 1.5 million acre-feet of Colorado River water per year. From there, the water is pumped hundreds of miles across central Arizona for delivery to municipal, industrial, and agricultural users from Phoenix to Tucson. After crossing the valley, the canal approaches the CAP Salt River Siphon, located just downstream of the Granite Reef Diversion Dam. Here, the open ditch canal goes underground, bringing CAP water under the Salt River and SRP's Arizona and South Canals. The pressure created by the siphon pushes the water uphill, emerging at the surface on the south side of the Salt River. Just downstream is the CAP SRP Interconnection Facility, also known as the CSIF. With a total capacity of 1,200 cubic feet per second, the CSIF is a one-way interconnection of the CAP canal to SRP's water delivery system. The CSIF delivers CAP water to one of 3 points, either to SRP's South Canal, to the Salt River bed, or to SRP's Arizona Canal. With these connections, CAP water can be delivered to any point along more than 1,200 miles of SRP canals and laterals, including recharge facilities and 11 drinking water treatment plants, used to provide safe, reliable drinking water to the valley. In addition to the treatment plants served from SRP's canals, there are 9 water treatment plants on the CAP system. In general, the water treatment plants on the SRP canals treat SRP water and serve SRP lands, while the water treatment plants on the CAP system treat CAP water and serve areas outside of SRP. However, there are significant water supplies stored underground in SRP's service area and in SRP's reservoirs, intended to serve customers outside of SRP's service area. Currently, those supplies can only be delivered to water treatment plants directly connected to SRP's delivery system. The capability of the connected water treatment plants to push water to areas where it's needed ranges from very limited to non-existent. The ability to put water from SRP's system into the CAP canal would change that. In order to facilitate expanded delivery and enhanced resiliency of the valley's water supplies, SRP is proposing to construct a new SRP-CAP interconnection. Referred to as the SCIF, this interconnection facility will be a critical component of the valley's water delivery infrastructure. Located next to the existing interconnection facility, the SCIF will allow greater flexibility and improved efficiency by delivering the valley's water supply to where it's needed. The facility will consist of a pumping station and a short length of underground pipe connecting SRP's South Canal to the CAP Canal. The SCIF can be used in a variety of ways to transport water without building extensive and costly additional infrastructure like pipelines and wells. For example, using the SCIF to deliver water held in the 304,000 acre-feet of storage capacity in the new conservation space at Roosevelt Lake eliminates the need for additional infrastructure to move this water outside of SRP's service area. NCS water stored here by Mesa, Tempe, Chandler, Scottsdale, Phoenix, and Glendale is intended for use outside of SRP's service area, but at present can only be delivered to those cities' SRP treatment plants. With the SCIF in place, Mesa, for example, could order its NCS water released from Roosevelt Lake, have it diverted through the SCIF, and use the CAP canal to directly deliver it to Mesa's CAP water treatment plant for use outside of SRP's water service area. The SCIF can provide the same access for water users located upstream of the interconnection. For example, Glendale could order its NCS water released from Roosevelt Lake to be diverted through the SCIF and delivered to the CAP canal, and in turn, take delivery of water from the CAP canal at its water treatment plant. This type of indirect delivery is possible without impacting other CAP deliveries, and could even provide operational flexibility for the CAP during peak demand periods. The SCIF could be used in the same way for Phoenix's Gatewater and SRP CAP water exchange. But perhaps its greatest impact will be on the recovery of long-term storage credits stored within SRP's water service area. Most of the CAP water released to the SRP delivery system has been recharged into underground storage facilities operated by SRP. SRP manages 3 recharge facilities: the SRP Groundwater Savings Facility, the New River Agua Fria River Underground Storage Project, or NAUSP, and the Granite Reef Underground Storage Project, or GRUSP. Also located within SRP's boundaries are several other city-owned recharge projects. Altogether, over 1.8 million acre-feet of long-term storage credits are currently stored at these facilities. These credits are held by Valley Cities, the Arizona Water Banking Authority, the CAP, SRP, and others. When needed, these credits will be pumped from a well, ideally one located within the area where the water was stored. SRP has over 270 wells within its service area that are ideally located for recovering these long-term storage credits. But like the surface water stored in SRP's reservoirs, recovered well water can currently only be delivered using SRP's delivery system. That presents a problem, considering that the vast majority of these credits are intended to meet water needs outside of SRP's service area for future growth or for use during a Colorado River shortage. Here's how this SCIF can help. With the new interconnection in place, cities like Phoenix, with over 200,000 acre-feet of credits stored within SRP's service area, can arrange to use SRP's wells for recovery. One or more wells would pump Phoenix's stored water and deliver it to SRP customers in place of the SRP water they would normally receive. The SRP water would instead be diverted into the CAP canal using the SCIF, allowing Phoenix to take delivery of an equal amount of water at their CAP water treatment plant. This same arrangement can be made with cities located outside of SRP's water service area. For example, Apache Junction has recharged CAP water at SRP's groundwater savings facility. In the future, they could use this SCIF to obtain direct access to their stored water using SRP's wells capable of recovering water from the area where it was stored. Apache Junction would arrange to use SRP's wells for recovery. One or more of SRP's wells would pump the stored water and deliver it to SRP customers in place of the SRP water they would normally receive. That water would instead be diverted into the CAP canal using the SCIF, which would flow down to Apache Junction's CAP water treatment plant. This same arrangement could also benefit future development in Queen Creek, the Santan Valley, Superstition Vistas, Goodyear, and Buckeye through the purchase of existing credits stored within SRP's boundaries, or for future storage and recovery of newly acquired water resources. Whether for recovery, direct or indirect delivery, the SCIF offers valuable benefits, such as an infrastructure solution that serves the entire valley, and a secure water resource management tool that provides added resiliency for the valley's water supplies. Being prepared for both future growth and water supply shortages requires regional cooperation, just as it did to build both the Salt River Project and the CAP. Interconnections between water systems, like the SCIF, are necessary to maximize efficiencies of existing infrastructure and facilitate flexible water delivery systems that can adapt to changing conditions. Arizona's water history is distinguished by the impact of strategic water infrastructure, and that remains true today. Arizona's future will require the same types of investment in water infrastructure to maintain dependable access to renewable supplies in increasingly uncertain times.
Kind of like mass transit for water. It's taking the bus.
Did you have some presentation to go along with this, or?
Yes, we do.
So I'm Anthony Beckham. I'm the SCIF project manager. Just want to say it's an honor to be here before the Cave Creek Committee today. I actually grew up in Cave Creek, so happy to be here.
Do we get a discount?
If I could have. So I think
I like
the
that.
video took a lot of my thunder away. But really just wanted to talk about the project and the process for joining if Cave Creek decides to go that route. So as the video mentioned, there is an existing connection from the CAP system to SRP's canal system. and that is the CAP SRP interconnection facility. The facility that we're here to talk about today is the SCIF, or the SRP CAP interconnection facility. And it's very common to mix those up, and we do it all the time at SRP. So, and just talking about a couple aspects of the SCIF. So the alignment has changed, you might notice, as working with CAP on the design. There's some engineered fill material around the CAP canal, and that's why the alignment has changed. But it also, there's a fair amount of lift involved, about 150 to 200 feet of lift at this point in time. So there will be a requirement of a substation to power pumps to transport that water uphill. In terms of the benefits of the SCIF facility, it's a strategic interconnection for increased regional operational flexibility. It physically connects SRP system to CAP canal. It enables direct delivery downstream in exchanges with upstream entities, including main stem on the Colorado River, and then also to water treatment plants, recharge facilities. There's also firming opportunities in utilizing new development like the new Verde space. It also improves the ability to use non-project water from SRP system. So as noted in the video, 2 of those supplies are in existence today. So we have the Roosevelt temporary deviation space. Don't want to go too far into the weeds, but I can tell you there's a space, flood control space, that once water enters into that space, we have to follow a manual from the Army Corps of Engineers for safety reasons. We got a 5-foot deviation in that space. So usually we have to evacuate that space within 20 days. In the first 5 feet of that space, we're able to extend our releases to 120 days. So we have a pilot program, so to speak, for about 5 years, where we can slowly release and safely that five feet of space when it fills with water in Roosevelt. So the other one is the new conservation space, which is described in the video. And I know there's some earlier discussion. One of the things I just wanted to highlight is, most of the water rights in SRP system are tied to the land. Over time, there's been infrastructure improvements to the dam, which enable additional storage within our reservoir system. So with those supplies that were kind of added to our project over time, those supplies can be moved outside of SRP's water service area. We also have long-term storage credits, which is those water, CAP water, and effluent in some cases that's been stored underground in SRP's groundwater savings facility, essentially our irrigation district boundary, and then also our constructed recharge facilities. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the new Verde space would be another potential supply that could be moved through the SCIF. And then just a status update. So right now, we have about 12 participants on the project, including CAP and SRP. And we're in the 30% design phase, and we're planning to complete that by September. So it's a little bit different process compared to the new Verde space, where the project participants are taking the risk themselves, and they're paying for this. At this point in time, there's no federal dollars that are matching the money that they're putting into the project. So the first agreement that we have with the participants are specifically for 30% engineering design. And the second agreement, which we're currently drafting, will be to cover the environmental compliance, or the NEPA, which we anticipate submitting the NOI in November, similar to Bartlett. And that would be about a 2-year process. And so the NEPA would probably kick off in January, February timeline. In 2 years from there is when we would anticipate to be able to start construction. So I don't have a schedule, but I can talk high level. So 2 years from January, February timelines gets us to 2027. And so we have roughly about 3 years of construction for the facility. And so we're planning to complete just before 2030 to have the facility in place. So at this point in time, there is not federal funding, but there is an opportunity to. And we've been talking to the grants program under the Lower Colorado River Basin Conservation Efficiency Program. So there's two different buckets. Some of those are for short-term conservation efforts among water users in the CAP system. The second one's for longer-term conservation efforts. So the bucket 2 is the one that we're currently examining and working with our stakeholders and looking at. In terms of the costs, the most recent costs that we've shared with our participants for construction, design, different construction management services from external entities that would be required for construction of the facility is about 177 million. If you're looking at the cost per acre foot, it's around 180,000 acre feet, or 500 CFS is the design of the facility. So the cost per acre foot is around 1,000. I would probably use $1,000 to $1,500 an acre foot for that cost. In terms of the process for becoming a SCIF participant or participant in the project, there's the current agreement that we have with the participants has a specific clause that addresses the process for joining. So additional parties similar to Bartlett will be added by majority of vote. There's a process where if Cave Creek wanted to join, we would request a letter of interest from Cave Creek, and then we would bring that to our SCIF participants at one of our scheduled meetings. And depending on when you join, so at this point, we're pretty close to finishing the 30% design. There is a risk premium of 20% that the other participants kind of took by completing the 30% design phase. So there's multiple phases where if you wanted to join, you could, but you would have to incur that 20% risk premium. And that's really all I have for today, and I'll welcome any questions.
Last question, how many other agencies are currently participating in the SCIF?
So there's 12 participants, so 11 technically, if you include CAP, and then there's 10 municipal entities. So some are cities, and then there's a couple others.
Thank you.
Would outside, if you're not a participant, will you, will there be a schedule of costs to still transfer water?
Mayor Morris, yes, there would be a cost, and we can provide that even if you're not a participant. We'd have to walk through what that looks like with our participants, and I'm saying that because we have some cost figures that we're looking at and have to share to our participants first.
Well, yeah, the cost isn't important. What is the concept that outsiders can use it. The people that own it ought to get something for that, just like anything else. But since we're so we're on the upstream side here, it seemed like we would have a fairly easy time exchanging CAP water or Verde River water for CAP water. There'd be a lot of potential partners. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Mayor Morris, I think that's correct. I also don't want to be tone deaf. So we've talked about the engineering design of the facility, and right now we're working with CAP on the water quality efforts. So there are standards within the CAP system in how and when that water can be moved. So the capacity of 500 CFS that we have right now is based on 6 months of operation. So that'd be primarily during summer months, and that's based on the arsenic conditions in the Verde system.
What is the arsenic there?
It's just naturally occurring.
I mean, the percentage, the ppm, ppb, whatever how close is the drinking water standard, which is what, 12, 16, Sean? 10. Yeah.
This drinking water standard is 10 milligrams per liter. So I guess the question is, I've heard that too. So because of the arsenic that comes off Verde River, I'm not sure if you guys know that you're limited to only a 6-month window of getting deliveries through the SCIF of our water resources.
And that's correct. That's something that we're working through with CAP to understand what that can look like. There is the possibility that maybe a lower flow amount can move the other 6 months out of the year, but it's something that we're still examining with CAP. But for now, to be conservative because the arsenic standards or the arsenic that we're seeing wouldn't comply with the standards that CAP is.
I'm not even sure why we would need to be in the SCIF or ever use it. I mean, we get cap water. And it would seem to me that there are so many potential partners around that you could give the Verde River water to and just translate that into cap water, which essentially is everybody else around.
So Anthony, my mayor and council, so correct, you do not need to be a part of SCIF. You could do an exchange of some user downstream of your water, and through that effort, then they would offer some water upstream, like for like, to come into your turnout on the CAP canal to your system. So that is part of the luxury of, we can help navigate that with you and other entities downstream. So like from Bartlett, City of Surprise is a partner on Bartlett, but not on SCIF. They're gonna have to work out some exchange agreements to get water to Surprise in exchange for their water in the NVS space. So you can get creative on doing exchanges to facilitate getting water to your intake, and not necessarily need to be part of SCIF to do that.
Is Phoenix a part of SCIF?
Yes.
Okay, questions from council? Staff?
Oh, yeah, so I'm just to wrap this out, or trying to wrap my head around some of this stuff. So two things that I heard that came out earlier, and I think I've learned about it. So if we wanted to participate in the Bartlett, there's a cost to get through the study. And then because of the averaging of the storage, since we're wrapping up the master plan, we'd be looking to probably get between 500 and 1,000 acre feet to make it to help shore up the town's water supplies. So what I heard on the Bartlett side of the equation is that we'd have to ask to make sure we can get that available on an average year. We have to ask for 3.5 times that. So I think it's 1,750 to 3,500 acre feet of water. So that's our participation in Bartlett. And then with the SCIF, if we were to join the SCIF, that would give us access to the transportation between, and that would help facilitate our arrangements. But the SCIF is limited to deliver that through a 6-month window right now at this point. So we have to factor those two things in. It sort of adds to our cost. And the $1,000 to $1,500 per acre foot you're thinking of right now, was that the construction estimate at this point?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our participation for the town to join right now, what would that be, like similar to what was brought out in the presentation of Bartlett, where that's a $205,000 fee for the next one time, and then the ongoing for the next 2 years? What would that be for the SCIF project?
So I can give you a range and a ballpark of figures. And it depends on which amount you choose. If you talked about 500 to 1,000 acre feet. So if you're using the 3.5 factor, that's 1,500 to 3,500 acre feet. For the 30% design, the current agreement with the risk premium, you'd probably be looking at $20K for the 1,500 acre feet or 4.8 CFS, and $40K for the 3,500 acre feet and 9.7 CFS. Okay. For NEPA costs, we're still working through what that looks like. But we did provide some figures to our SCIF participants, so I can give you some ballpark figures based on the capacity. So for NEPA, you might be looking at 30K on the low end and then 60K on the upper end for that 3,500 acre feet. And then one of the things I didn't also talk about is that, so the engineered design of the facility is 500 CFS. Right now we have 409 CFS allocated. And we do have 2 additional members that are going to be seeking a vote the next month. But there still is remaining capacity for participants to join. So.
Okay. Yeah, because if I do the math right, which I often sometimes mess up, for that would mean we'll be looking between 4.8 and 9.7 cubic feet per second of capacity. So it sounds like that's still available to be allocated. Okay.
Yep.
So just to recap, what I heard is somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 at this point for town to participate, with a follow-up NEPA study for another 30 to 60. So somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 to participate, and then construction, which is the 1,000 to 1,500 per construction. That's a future cost we'd have to build into this. So yeah, that's something we have to balance off. Is it worth us participating in that, or we just work on arrangements downstream to allow for this? Obviously, participating in the SCIF gives us access to that and helps us but there's a financial cost to doing that. So it's something we'll have to come
Well,
back to.
the SCIF would be a value if, for someone downstream from Apache Junction on, but it's hard to see where it would, well, we could just do a separate exchange here without using the SCIF at all, in my mind, presuming they could identify partners.
Yeah, as Anthony brought up, about Surprise is not participating in the SCIF, so they're just working on relationships downstream. So that's something as an option. So once we are upstream of the SRP CAP and also for the partners, you got to put our little treatment plant on your maps in the future. So we're small, but we're important. We're small, but important. We're way up there, 12 miles north of the Cap Canal. Yeah, so that's something we have to look at and evaluate whether it's worth us to join the SCIF. It gives us some rights, but is it worth it for value wise, or we just work on partnerships and exchanges?
Okay. Any other questions? Staff, do you have any, is staff completely?
So process wise, what we're going to do is we're going to bring this back to the next council meeting for us to get your decision on this. So we don't want to belabor this, but that's the process. And we have a pretty good read on the council, and we'll bring that back. It'll be the two pieces. We were not aware at the time we put together the staff report for tonight that the SCIF was going to be part of the discussion. I'm glad it was, because I think that's potentially an important component. But as the mayor mentioned, there are other alternatives probably for us to get water if we were in this Bartlett Dam expansion project. So that's the process. We'll be coming back to you the next meeting in September with a decision. And I think what we might do, since we need to jumpstart that, is we will likely put the MOU on and just skip the step with the letter of intent. And then we'll just have the council potentially act on that. We could talk, Kyle, a little bit about that process.
However, we have public comment on this, but before that starts, I'd like to say that I really admire SRP has such a history. My grandfather worked on the dam up there, the Tonto Dam, back in 1909 or whatever it was. But SRP has a history in this state, and you really are the centerpiece, because you're right in the middle of both systems. You're the connecting. It's great to see this kind of cooperation and thinking, and talk about exchanging water and storing water. So I just give all the compliments in the world to SRP for doing this, and I certainly commend you for your presentation tonight. It's very, very good, very high quality, and looks like your dam work is pretty high quality too. So
To your grandfather, he
Yeah.
helped build it. So
yeah. He, well, I'll tell that story later. We have public comment on this if we're finished here. So any comments?
Rudy Fisher.
First one out the gate. Thank you, Mayor, Council. So, I haven't seen this presentation about the SRP project, although I've been watching the dam sort of schematics for about a year. And the reason for that is I go to a lot of the CAP meetings and AMWA meetings and all the geeky stuff. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running for the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, which is the group that oversees the CAP. So it was interesting to see the SCIF program, because I think it's one of the most exciting projects that they have going in the last 15 or 20 years. I think it'd be really good. One of the things that with water right now, and like I said, I see a lot of meetings, a lot of very smart people looking at not so much the cost of water, but the availability. And that's going to be the big driving factor here in Arizona. I mean, we're in a desert, and unfortunately, we're kind of reliant on a federal partner who's helped build a lot of projects, but they also sort of regulate what we get out of it. And that could be, it's a little, well, there's the good and there's the bad. So I've been on a city council, and I've served on a water board in an elected position. So I know where you guys are coming from. You're looking to make sure that the public's money is being spent the best way that you can spend it. But if you look at the history of things like the SRP project in 1903, or the Hoover Dam, or the 20-year project for the CAP. The things that they could do back then were a lot easier. And, you know, I worked at Bechtel with some people who had been on the Hoover Dam. And the stories there, I'm just amazed at what they could get away with that they can't now because of safety considerations and environmental impact statements that you have to go through. And that's just a part of the process. But I guess I'd sum it up before I take too much time. I think it's good consideration of both projects and being involved in it. It's better to be at the table than not, because availability is going to be an issue coming down the line. So I'd say give some serious consideration to getting involved with the dam project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Ron Sova.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, Ron Sova, Town of Cave Creek, Town Core resident. I know I'm limited to 3 minutes, so I'll try to be very quick. I have a lot of questions. I know you can't respond to them, so I'd ask you to consider my questions and your analysis of whether you move forward or not. And my comments are based on the information that was provided tonight by SRP and in the packet online. And with that, my questions would be, how much will it cost to move forward? I had heard a while back it was going to be $140,000 as a non-voting entity. And I've seen with the presentation tonight, it would start at 90. And I think in answer to Sean's question, it was 205. So that's been addressed. And then I had a question of the 22 project partners. It appeared that only, I think it was about, what was the number? About 14 were cities and towns. The rest were other agencies. And I think that question was answered as to, are they all current members of SRP and being served? So that's been addressed. And then of the $28 million feasibility study, it was answered that roughly half of that would be paid for by the feds. And my question would be, what would be Cave Creek's anticipated amount should you move forward for the $14 million yet to be spent? How would that be allocated between the 22 current project partners, if that's the right number? Another question was, if the project's approved, what would be the anticipated cost to Cave Creek for the $1 billion anticipated cost? And along those lines, my question is that billion dollar number in today's dollars, or is that a number that has already been adjusted for inflation for sometime 10 or 15 or more years from now? I don't know. How would Cave Creek gain access to SRP water should you move forward? That question's been addressed, and I've learned a lot about the SCIF program. That sounds like a good program. And then what might the town's share be to pay the estimated $1 billion? And what might the town receive for that payment in terms of water, any additional cost, fees, or expenses? I know I'm flashing red. If I could have 30 more seconds, I'll be done. And I'm always skeptical of any government, especially the Fed's ability to complete any project on time and on budget. So these numbers, I question what the real numbers are going to be, because the project is going to be somewhere way in the future, and who knows with inflation. And that it's the fact that we're a town of about 5,500 people with limited income. I think that you, the council, need to be fiscally responsible in looking at the benefits to be gained and the losses to be avoided by moving forward with this program, and also the SCIP program. It's a lot to absorb, a lot to understand. And I wish you luck in your decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Bruce Arlen.
Thank you. Great presentation tonight. I just want to me, it's so positive. We have I want to encourage the council to take this. I know you guys are going to take it very seriously, but to create the letter of intent or the MOU, whatever it takes. And this opportunity has presented itself to us. We need the water. Water is going to go through the roof. We really don't have a great source of water that we can claim today. This is a huge opportunity. And as Manager Grady Miller pointed out, we have a way out at the last minute if we wanted to. Let's find out everything and take it very seriously. I think you guys will be heroes if we make this thing happen, and the town will be secure with water. So I encourage a yes, I think in September when you're going to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arlen.
I do not have any additional speakers.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank SRP and I think we have I'll get a comment from staff here, but I think you've got the standing order process we have is you're going to present an analysis and a recommendation at the meeting coming up, and we'll have we'll be able to put our own situation over what we've heard tonight and see, and all we're voting for is to see another card, kind of like a poker match.
Yes.
Ante. Yeah. So I'll ask staff if they have any final comments. Staff, council, excuse me.
I just have one. Time is of the essence. I think we heard that SRP needs to make some decisions in September. Do we have an exact date in September that you need our response?
Vice Mayor, and council, kind of laying out the timeline, we would need to know, probably by the middle of September. Because once we get the decision that you want to move forward, we have to put that to a vote to the steering committee. That is probably going to be a 2-week process. So that gets us to the end of September. And then we would only have about a month to go through the water needs and the allocation process. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. So I guess to answer your question, probably by the middle of September, we would need to know.
Okay, we'll get that done.
Yeah. And I think it fits with our schedule right now. I'll talk to Kyle after the meeting, but we could do this letter of intent, which, if the council opted not to do the MOU, which would finalize and formalize the relationship, then that's all off and then that's it. So, but we'll be able to stay with the schedule that we just heard from Jacob.
Right, because our first meeting in September
It's
is
not until the 16th.
right.
Right. Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
might need to adjust that.
Would we need an additional meeting?
What you can't hear? Oh.
Hello, I'm Amanda Moniz. I'm a representative of Central Arizona Project, sit on the board. And just something to consider, knowing what's going on with CAP and the Colorado River and the needs of this town, being that CAP is 100% of your portfolio, and looking at what our future looks like on the CAP, I would hope that the needs assessment on the SRP dam project would be fairly large in your favor. Looking at other partners in this project, they have larger portfolios that have mixture of different types of water, but the need of this town seems to be very great in needing an additional water supply. And looking at what the state has to offer in additional water supplies currently at this time is extremely minimal. So taking a gamble to see that any additional water can be added to the town is probably greatly in consideration for you to say yes. So I just want to make those comments for your town. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any closing comments?
So I do have a question. Are we going to have a special town council meeting?
I'm going to talk to Kyle, and if I need to, I'll work with the council on trying to find an available date. As you know, the Labor Day has caused a little bit of a problem with a regularly scheduled
Oh,
council
yeah.
meeting on the
Got it.
second, but if we need to, we will.
We do have a special meeting on the 9th, so we could squeeze it in if we had integrated water master plan. I have that on my calendar.
Yes.
Yeah,
But it's a work session and it's probably a 3-hour work session just on that. So it's not to say it can't be done. I'm
Priorities.
just saying
Right.
it's, I think we'll have to have this as a separate meeting date.
Okay, seeing no further business, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for attending and thank you, SRP.